Hello and welcome to Diana's Makerspace. This is a very special makerspace where I like to talk about mutism and autism. I have phone mutism and also autism, and sometimes even social mutism is shown in the movie Hear Me. And part of it is brought up because basically I'm very sensitive to my environment. Sometimes it gets my friends very sensitive, upset because they say, well, you should be old enough not to be swayed by how you think other people perceive you and other things. But um, and that's part of the reason why sometimes I feel better talking through social media, through videos, or even just sometimes posting or journalism, like in the movie Hear Me. Um, and when I'm in class, sometimes I'll clam up because if I feel the class is sort of one-sided, that like what happened one time when I had an anatomy class, it really caused me to have very much aggravate my mutant because of the way it was taught by a Canadian professor who didn't understand American customs and didn't understand people had autism, mutism. So, and that's why I put a complaint to the Board of Regents, which they agreed my complaint was right, and was at the University of Wisconsin. The thing about mutism and autism is people think with someone mutism, like with me, they say, well, she's stuck up. She doesn't talk with anyone. She walks by. She just sometimes like, and they'll say, well, she just sits there. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't want to talk. It's not really I don't want to talk. It's the problem is like in the movie Hear Me. I say, well, am I going to say the wrong things there? Sometimes it takes courage to talk, and sometimes I can only talk with very close friends. I still have phone mutism because like yesterday, I'm planning to get some furniture at Salvation Army. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you call Salvation Army after I deliver? And I had to ask her to call because basically I still have problems talking over the phone because of my phone mutism, because of appearing to say the wrong thing or just appearing awkward. For me, it's very awkward. And that goes back to a very early age where some people who remember the old days of Wisconsin natural gas in April, where the moratorium was over and you had to pay your gas bill and you made payment arrangements, but sometimes you couldn't make all the payment arrangements, so I had to renegotiate to because you could pay a little bit next week, you could catch up next week, but before the diggers came out, and some parents sometimes were so stressed out they'd have their kids called, and I was one of those that would have to call like that though, and relay with my parents on the other line. So I want tell them to do this, tell them, and they said, "Well, I'll come," and then they get very angry at me because I was the middle person, and that caused me to sort of have phone phobia because of the way Wisconsin natural gas worked. And even when my dad and I would have to go in and talk with an adjuster, sometimes how they come and get very stern like that. Say, well, you have 4 apartments. You should be able to do this and this and this. Yes, but our tenants are behind. They haven't paid us. We tried to. Well, why don't you evict them? Well, it takes us a long time to re-rent an apartment, to repaint it, everything else. It's better to work with them and let them catch up. And so we'd end up calling the Wisconsin Public Service Commission many times. And sometimes at the Wisconsin Public Service Commission in the 90s, I had people who got very angry with me because I was having a relay. That's and that's why sometimes I'm a little bit, I don't like talking over the phone. And with mutism, it is like the movie. You want to say stuff, but you don't want to. And the thing is, also you're afraid to and stuff like that also because you're worried of how other people would think of you, and even it's a protection mechanism because last year we had a new manager. She came in the building. Her husband was in the army. I have a feeling that he was a retired army non-com. She wore his army um, um, bracelet or lanyard, army lanyard, probably. But she tried to run the place like an army. Everything spick and span, and using me as an example and other people. And we had 25 people moved out of the building. It took 6 months for them to re-rent to 25 apartments. There's now a new manager who's very understanding, but it did cause me to have my mutism increase because basically I just don't want to um, deal with certain types of people, and also made me think about staying in Racine though too, because my parents, when we moved from Wauwatosa, my dad was an executive at Walker Manufacturing, designing muffler systems and catalytic converter systems, and they wanted us to live in a housing area by Wind Point, basically North Main Street and Wind Point. But the reason why my parents didn't want my sister and me to live there is because of well, my mother perceived as the tough kids from Racine were tougher than the tough kids from Kenosha. Especially when I met friends in pre-med who went to high school and we seen where they had to go in groups of three because they were sensitive, had mutism or autism like me. But basically, to some people, you think we pass, but we actually do have it. So that's why I was raised in Kenosha. And the school I went to was actually a school in my dad's neighborhood. They had a polio school where people who had polio or disabilities were treated with care and compassion. That's what helped my dad. But I went to Jefferson School, which was next to the polio school. But they had teachers who were caring and compassionate. However, when I did get in junior high school, I did gym classes where basically it was very hard for me because I'd have people who tease me because they didn't even sense then that I was LGBT, and they used to play games like Smear the Queer and everything else like that though. And so high school through high school, I had to have special gym classes or sometimes no gym classes basically. But the thing is about mutism and autism is that basically many people think that they understand many things and they understand people and they think that everyone shouldn't be afraid to talk, shouldn't be afraid to speak, should want to talk or socialize. Not necessarily because what happens mutism and autism is basically you start have defense mechanisms, and sometimes it takes a while to get over the defense mechanisms. Like in the movie Hear Me, it showed that basically she had an educational psychologist that helped her get to the point where she could. But when she went to one school, she couldn't go because the school was not compassionate about her mutism. When I went to graduate school, I had an option of going to graduate school at University of Wisconsin, which would have meant a free ride for me, or basically going to the West Coast, which meant taking out student loan. The reason I took out student loan because when I was on the West Coast and I worked on the West Coast, basically I worked around Phoenix, where most military bases were in Nevada, because I was a civilian military contractor for the Air Force then. Well, what I noticed is I noticed many people that were compassionate about those who have LGBT, those who understand mutism and autism. So in Phoenix, I could express myself and not be guarded or not face what I call the kryptonite of the tough kids that make me shut down. Also, when I went to University of Phoenix, the best thing they did was when I started my MBA program, they had an educational psychologist and therapist that worked with me from my MBA program through my doctoral program, and that helped greatly. We talk weekly, we meet weekly, just like in the movie Hear Me, and online. It also they had procedures for when you talked online, no cyberbullying, no such and such. So everything was monitored, and that's how that for those of us who have mutism autism, using a text-based online system was wonderful to answer questions, class questions, like papers, and do other things like that. Those rather than a traditional classroom where you can face bullying. Because when I did go back to my alma mater, UW Parkside, many years after obtaining my doctoral degree and MBA from University of Phoenix, um, I did experience the bullyism and also lack of um, concern regarding my mutism and autism, and even sometimes people when we did a communications class, we had meeting groups, and the one group that we formed were all the people that were rejected by everyone else. That was our group, and we did it on community policing, our subject. But everyone else rejected us. People coming in and then basically, and afterwards, I took one more communication class, but halfway through the class, I dropped it because basically I was experiencing the same thing. Basically, the environment of the professor was increasing my mutism and autism. So I did a midterm project sending in my YouTube film, which everyone gave a great review to, and but they also told me that when I left, the professor treated them shitty because when I was there, I was sort of like the front wall. But again, other students had mutism, autism, but again, they couldn't tell me until basically they felt that they were in a safe place to discuss it, but they couldn't tell me in class or around class because of this one professor's bad attitude and egotism. And he's a young professor in his 30s, and I was very surprised compared to when I went to Parkside because there are many professors in their 30s that were more mature and more understanding. The thing is about mutism and autism is that we're very easy to pick on because basically a lot of people think we're stuck up. They'll say, well, this and this. And even like in Racine, though, when I do go out in Racine, I just go out with friends. Like most of the time, I prefer to go to Barnes and Noble because Barnes and Noble have people work that understand people who do have mutism and autism. And what happens? We're not pointed out. We're made to be part of this thing. And it's like Old Kenosha. Old Kenosha, many restaurants in Old Kenosha, they had the day in hotel where many disabled veterans stay in. And many of them, sometimes basically because of the disability, sometimes have budget issues, but they want to go for lunch. And sometimes they order something, they didn't have enough to order coffee. But what a lot of restaurants would do, sometimes they provide a free lunch, sometimes they pay for the part that they couldn't pay for. But a few days ago, I went to What's Silly Scene and I ordered what I normally order when I and my friend go out. She likes the biggie bag. I like the double stack sandwich with the key take frosty, senior coffee. And the biggie bag includes a small drink. And she said, well, can I get a small coffee? And I do. I normally do. I ordered two senior coffees in addition to the biggie bag. And the one person who was there was a transplant from Chicago, interrupted my order, caused me to lose my thing, aggravated my mutism and autism, and basically, we're planning to go out today, but my friend wasn't feeling well, so in some ways I'm glad we're not going out until Friday because to let things pass over. There's some managers there who understand me, but with the Chicago transplants and sometimes Milwaukee, core transplants, they're afraid to speak up to them. And what happens is, yes, I understand people from the Chicago ghetto and Milwaukee and core had a hard life and stuff. I'm not the enemy. But basically, what happens is I'm very easy to pick on because this one person was using it to train another person who was starting. And she finally said, "Well, wait a minute. You've been harassing Diane. Diane's been nice all the way through this. She asked you what's the proper way to give the order. When she came back to get a refill on coffee, she didn't hold a grudge. And this young person who was working there, I saw when she was on break, she was deciding, well, should I really stay working at this Wendy's or not? Because when she saw this one um, person who I thought was okay, but basically really showed a bad side the last time I was there, from the from the Chicago transplant, it makes me wonder about where can I go and stuff. That's why I'd rather go to Barnes and Noble, pay $7 for coffee because I know that due to my mutism autism, I'm not going to be bothered. I can thrive. I can go. I can talk with some people that I feel comfortable talking with. And if I don't want to talk, that's fine too, because there are many of us that go there that don't want to talk, but we agree, but we like being able to hang out with each other just sometimes in silence because basically it's support. Um, I hope some of you can understand this and try to think about this because the tough kids from we've seen, even some of those that are my age in the 60s, like this one manager that was here last year. Um, I don't know if maybe they don't realize what they're doing, or maybe they do, or maybe they feel they have to do it because they have to pay for the expensive truck or something. But but the thing is, it's time for people to speak up, and just like even in the movie The Locker Room, people speak up and stop this thing about hazing and cyberbullying hazing too. Um, well, let me know what you think. I know this is normally different compared to some of the videos that I've given, and the best way to reach me is on YouTube, Facebook, X, Pinterest. Just a minute. Sometimes it takes a while for me to get back and make comments because sometimes I do get migraines. Sometimes I do get flashbacks because of my mutism and autism. Like this morning, 3 o'clock, I had a severe migraine headache and I didn't get to bed till 5 o'clock, and so I slept until about 11 o'clock. So I'm glad. In some ways, my friend and I weren't meeting for lunch. Well, this has been my special talk about my personal journey living with mutism and autism, in hopes that helps others who have mutism autism, and also that helps others who have friends and family members. Because I do recommend watching the movie Hear Me, and sometimes watching it many times because there are many things that you may miss the first time. Well, thanks again for listening, and this concludes the special Diana's Makerspace on mutism and autism.